Hello and welcome to another episode of Gemstone Mine. I'm John.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Jake.
And today we're going to be talking about what's in our cart for the new release of Commander Legends. So just like before, we're not looking to do a deep dive card by card for the entire set. We would probably be here for another 2-hour marathon, multi-episode epic. And I'm not really feeling that one today. Are you, Alex?
No. I'm not. I'm not.
So what are the idea behind these What's in Our Card episodes is we're going to look at the singles we're looking to pick up when the new set releases. And while we may miss some cards that interest you or are going to be really popular, that's because we're looking at a tiny slice of the Commander metagame, the one that's kind of happening in our own backyard. But before we get started, let's talk about some news. So Commander Collection Green is going to be coming out, and I know it's something that I'm really interested in trying to track down, and I still don't know where to get it.
Yeah, I was really when they first announced it, what was in it, I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna buy 4 of them, 2 foil, 2 non-foil. And then I started seeing the pre-order prices for the non-foil ones going for about 100.
Yeah.
And then the foil ones going for $350. So that plan promptly went out the window. But I don't think any major carriers actually have them listed yet.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what they actually come in as. Our friendly local gaming store still doesn't quite know what allocation and prices are going to look like yet. Fingers crossed, because I would like to, we're living in troubled times, and it'd be nice to be able to continue to support my friendly local gaming store. And I would like to give them my money for something containing foily, shiny stuff for Galta. That would make me feel good a little bit better about spending that kind of money on cardboard. And it looks like 2021 is going to be the year of Tribal from what we've seen come out recently. We're going to have Vikings in the winter, Wizards in the spring, parties in the summer, and then werewolves and vampires in the fall.
I mean, so what you're saying is 2021 is my year for Magic, is what you're saying.
So if 2020 was the year of Commander, so 2021 is the year of Alex?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it's being marketed.
So I don't think we yet know what's going on with the fall set, which looks like a return to Innistrad, because the timeline says there's Innistrad vampires and Innistrad werewolves, and I don't think we know what that means yet, do we?
No, I haven't heard anything.
I
It
think
looks like
it's
2 separate sets being released at the same time, which... What?
I think it might be,
It'll be interesting.
It might be 2 smaller sets released closer together, kind of like a Dragon's Maze was, just a smaller set, and maybe the 5th time's the charm for a decent werewolf commander to come out of Innistrad.
So Dragon's Maze was not really its own set. It was the standalone 3rd set in a block. They could be doing something kind of like 2 mini Shadowmoor Eventide sets.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's going to be. It's potentially interesting. Innistrad has been fun every time we've gone there, and it would be nice if we continued that trend.
I'm looking forward to the Viking set.
Yeah.
I don't know. They've never done that before. And...
They kind of did with Ice Age.
I mean,
some
okay.
Ice Age and some Dominaria have got some Viking-esque to it, but I mean...
Yeah, what's her name? Cold Eyes or
Livisa
whatever.
Cold Eyes.
Yep,
Yeah,
and the whole
barbarians
Yaldorans or
and stuff.
Keldorans or however you pronounce it. They're pretty Viking. It'd be neat to see snow come back in a meaningful way again.
And not in Modern Masters or Modern...
Yeah,
Horizons.
let's not see another Arkham's Astrolabe. We could go without that one.
Maybe we can get some different color takes on Vikings. We've seen red ones, plenty of red ones, but what's a blue Viking or a
white
Viking?
Like a seafaring Viking, so you can have Vikings that live in the highlands and Vikings that live out in the raiders, and they can be black blue or red blue or something like that. But that's where pirates are currently living right now, so what's really the difference?
It's going to be interesting, kind of no matter what. And it sounds like in one of these sets, we're getting the rest of the modal double-faced lands.
Yeah, the dual lands or whatever.
Yeah,
the
other
dual lands.
Right,
there
the
needs
other
to be
4.
a catchy term for them.
I got nothing, man. The other 4 lands that we did not get in Zendikar Rising. And I don't know if that means we're going to get more modal double-faced cards in general in any of these sets.
Actually, we are. They did confirm that the Wizards and Viking sets are both going to have modal double-face cards, and they wound up putting them in the last set just as a teaser kind of thing. So I hope you enjoyed that mechanic, because we will be seeing a lot of it in 2021.
Well, why don't we then move ahead a little bit in our outline, because that's actually... So let's talk about some of the decks that we're tweaking. We can come back in a little bit to games we played, but I know that Jake, we're doing a lot of upgrades last night, but I've also been doing some upgrades with those modal double-faced cards for my decks. So I put a bunch of them into my monocolor decks. Basically, any one of them that was decent has gone into my mono white Oketra deck. So I'm running 3, and a 4th one is in the mail at the moment. I'm running the 2 uncommon ones, one that lets you deal damage equal to the number of creatures you control, one that lets you give a creature protection from a color. I'm running the rare one that's basically a board wipe, and I'm waiting for the mythic one that makes angels to come in the mail. Just more reach and more possibly keepable hands in a mono white deck seems good. I think I'm going to be running like 3 in Torbrand when all is said and done, and then I'm running Balaged Recovery and Turntimber Symbiosis in Galta at the moment. Anyone else?
Well, dang.
Anyone else doing any tweaking to their decks?
I'm sleeving one. Does that count?
In terms of modal double face, I am going to put Agadeem's Awakening in a deck, maybe, but that's it.
I have the mobile double phase red card and the white one both in Winota currently.
It's just the opportunity cost on them seems super low. Yes, occasionally just having one additional enters the battlefield tapped land will be a problem, but the number of times it turns a unkeepable hand into a keepable hand or lets you have a slightly better top deck in the late game, I think it outweighs a lot of those concerns. So I'm interested to see how they play out when we start to get some more games in.
I know the biggest push for the red one in the decks that it appears in is just that it kills Tymna.
The Shatter Skull Smashing just as a removal spell.
Yep, it kills Tymna.
It kills a lot of things. It's an X spell, so it does seem pretty good. I'm pretty happy for it for Torbrand when I get it in the mail. Anyone else tweaking any other decks?
Once we get to the individual cards for this set, I am adding some.
All right.
Other than that,
nothing super fancy. We talked about it a bit last night. I have I'm trying to move away from keeping cards just in binders sitting and just trying to build decks where they can just exist if I ever want to play them. Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of just like the Seraphic Greatsword from Commander's Legends, the Commander's Mail, and that uncommon Dwarf Artificer that gives your creatures double strike when they attack her. Might end up in my Voltron deck that I don't talk about too often, but those are things that got printed, I guess.
All right, so how about games we've played since the last time we all got together for our epic episode?
I haven't.
Yes, John, tell us about your game.
I can't be the only one who's played any game since last time.
I have not played Commander. However, I did proudly crash MTG Arena with Scoot Mob triggers.
Scoot Swarm?
Scoot Swarm triggers, yes. I crashed my client.
So you lost.
Yeah, but it was really fun watching 200 plus triggers on the stack.
In one way he lost, but in another way he still lost. But you know.
I lost, but I felt but I felt fulfilled.
Okay, I guess that makes some kind of a difference then. So the only games I've played, I got to play 2 games with Keenan, the commander out of Ikoria, the green-blue one. Hat tip to Pongo. He's from Team Turn 3, I believe. He has a variant on a CDH Keenan deck, which uses Mirage Mirror as the main win condition alongside of the Basalt Monolith combo, where you stack the triggers in such a way that in response to Mirage Mirror turning into a copy of Basalt Monolith, you turn it into a copy of a permanent that can tap for colored mana. Then you use some of your unbounded mana from Basalt Monolith to keep doing this infinitely. So you can filter essentially your colorless mana from Basalt Monolith into colored mana to use Keenan as an outlet to draw game-winning creatures onto the battlefield. I won a very messy game with this in a very, very stacks-heavy meta that Jake and I both play in. Yeah. I could feel your soul burning there a little bit, Jake.
Shout out to any of you monsters who listen to this.
Yes, we love you all, but it hurts sometimes when there are 2 Elesh Norns on the battlefield.
Elish Norns are wonderful. I don't know what you're talking about.
I definitely did not copy one. There's nothing. I didn't do anything wrong.
Hold on, so you're complaining about Elish Norns being on the battlefield and one of them was yours?
Maybe. Well, before we throw any more shade, why don't we get on to the main topic and talk about what's in our cart? So before we actually get into the singles we're really interested in picking up, there are probably a few honorable mentions we want to go through. Alex, you mentioned that one of the cards we should talk about, well, I guess it's a cycle, are the next half of the lands from Battle Bond.
Yeah, so the Battle Bond lands are unique in the fact that they are multicolored lands that, for the most part, drawing them, they will come in untapped, which is a large thing that we look for, whether you're playing competitive or normal. Having the full color wheel now makes it so that a lot of decks that previously didn't have access to that kind of smoothing now does. And they're in a set that I hopefully think will be a lot easier to get your hands on than Battle Bond was, so maybe they won't be as scarce.
Yeah, I hope that these can stay at a reasonable price, and the fact that they're also being printed with the extended art version in collector's packs should drive down the price on the non-special looking ones.
Yeah, I'm surprised how low the ones from Zendikar Expeditions have gone.
Yeah, so that would be really nice to see. There's also a card called War Room, which looks fairly interesting. This is a new colorless land, enters untapped, taps for colorless. You can pay 3, tap, and pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity to draw a card. So, in a monocolored deck, this is pay 3, pay 1 life, draw a card. In a 2-color deck, it's pay 3, pay 2 life, draw a card.
So what you're saying is it's going in Okatra?
It's going in Okatra. It's going to go into my Torbrand deck.
How about Galta?
Probably can get away with it. I don't know how many non-colored sources I want in Galta, if I'm being honest. Just that first forest makes a big difference. But it's at least under consideration.
It does. With the amount of times I've played against it, though, I've seen some games where we've pulled off wins against it solely by the fact that you weren't able to draw anything. So
yeah, it's worth considering. It's probably going to be... It's something I'm going to look at. I don't know how heavily I'm going to look at it, though. And then, Jake, there's also a new, well, potentially CDH deck that's making the rounds, and who has no thumbs and is potentially winning with Storm.
That guy. Yeah, so Krark, yeah, that's going to be awkward. The Thumbless is a Goblin Wizard, 2 mana, 2/2. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, return the spell to its owner's hand, and if you win the flip, copy the spell, and you can choose new targets. And he has partner. So I've seen a couple different builds for this. I think the one that looks the most weird is an Izzet build with Sakashima of 1,000 Faces as the other partner.
And we'll talk about Sakashima a little bit later because it's in somebody's cart already.
So basically you get Kark out and copy him, or get him and his thumb and then copy his thumb, and you can do a bunch of spell casting and coin flipping, and it's basically a weird Storm deck that involves coin flips. Yeah. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, the basic idea that I've seen is you just kind of storm off by, it doesn't matter if your ritual goes back to your hand or you copy it, and you just, ideally, you copy it and it goes back to your hand because you have multiple copies of Krark, and you just storm off that way. I don't know if it'll do anything, but it is something that people are building with.
Should get a running petition to allow his other thumb to be in the deck simply for thematic purposes. It doesn't do anything, but you should get points for just staying on focus and him having both the thumbs.
Well, what you do is you buy 98 copies of that card and then just back all of your cards with that in clear sleeves. So there you go.
That works too.
I like it. Speaking of things people like, we should probably also mention the most built deck so far on EDHREC.com is Obika, Brute Chronologist. This is the Grixis legend. 1, a blue, a black, and a red for a 3/4 legendary creature ogre wizard. Tap. The player whose turn it is may end the turn. So, Sundial of the Infinite on a commander. There are some weird things you can do with this. You can get around the end of the turn effects like Unearth, anything that says until end of turn or at end of turn, exile this or sacrifice this. In theory, if your opponent is really stupid, you could tap it on their upkeep and ask them if they want to end the turn. But generally speaking, It's mostly there to just do weird stuff, and I think it's also causing cards like Final Fortune to spike in price.
Yeah, if you put Final Fortune on an Isochron Scepter, then you get all the turns in the game.
With
Hooray!
with no downside.
Yeah, I mean, you're only relying on a creature to stick around for a whole turn cycles because it has summoning sickness and then not get killed, because if it does, then you lose the game.
I mean, this kind of gimmicky.
It's a little risky. It's, like a World Gorger type of thing where you're kind of going all in, and if it works, you win. If not, oh no.
I'm not really surprised that people are trying to build it. It is something, like, Sundial of the Infinite is always one of those cards that people seem to enjoy, just in general. So it's not a huge surprise to see this, I don't think.
Well, it's a unique effect, so it's, people love taking extra turns. It's hard to actually work them into a deck. So you had Yuriko that had some extra turn elements to it, and then you had Tatiova turns, and you really see them anywhere else. And then you've got the red ones, which appeared in some like World Gorger lists and things of that nature. But seeing the ability to have all the extra turns in one deck with no downside to half of them is interesting.
Yeah, it could be super interesting. And I think that's one of the themes that is kind of nice to see with Commander Legends. They did not try to print this set where, for the most part, not every card is meant to be smack you in the face. This has to go in every single Commander deck you ever play. It's full much more of kind of these weird, unique, and niche commanders and cards that don't really have a home in every single deck. So there's a lot of cards in this set we are going to be just glossing over. And there's a lot that are only really cool to a tiny handful of people, but to those people, they are going to be the coolest thing ever. Before we get into the set proper, though, there are a couple of notable reprints that are coming out in this set, which we should just do our due diligence, that these are cards that could probably be in a couple of shopping carts out there. Notable reprints, Austere Command is getting reprinted. That card always jumps back up to a couple of bucks after going down to $1 or $2 when it's not the Chase Rare or Chase Mythic in the pack. So good time to pick those up. Actually, this is another important point. With the existence of the collector's packs, the full art, and all these alternate like etched foils, there's probably going to be some opportunity for some pretty cheap cards to pick up. So it does tend to make the normal printing of these cards cheaper. So if you're on a budget and you're just trying to pick up some useful cards, some good ones that are being reprinted. Mana Drain is being reprinted.
Findhorn Elves is the biggest one, I think.
Yeah, the first time we're going to have the From the Vault 20 art without the From the Vault foiling.
It's also the first time it's in the modern card frame without From the Vault. So
yeah,
and it doesn't have the hideous
I'm excited about
hideous art on it from Ice Age.
The Ice Age art is
unique,
it's very appropriate for its time, and it has lots of nostalgia for me. Yes, there's also 3 visits that got reprinted for the first time.
Yes.
Which is cool because I was playing it in a couple decks, but I was proxying it because it was like $300 or something ridiculously stupid, and now it is $4, so I'm okay with that.
Agreed. Other notables, again, for budget players, the Mirage Cycle of Diamond, so Sky Diamond, Marble Diamond, Charcoal Diamond, Fire Diamond, and Moss Diamond.
Good job.
Thank you. These are 2 mana artifacts that come into play tapped and then tap for a single colored mana of their respective colors. These have now been reprinted at common, so they're going to be really easy to get for a reasonable mana rock for a lot of budget decks.
Oh, this is the first time they were printed at common, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I don't think it'll make any difference in Pauper, but...
No, it won't. It's just, I don't know. I like seeing things get downshifted.
Me too. What are some other notables? Alex, you mentioned there was one that's going to mean you can unload a very old and fairly pricey printing of a card.
Yeah, Scroll Rack. Scroll Rack got reprinted with a new modern border. It looks nice. It just means that I can move and sell my old Scroll Rack and just keep the new one and turn it into more cards. And the same thing stands for Rings of Bright Hearth, which badly needed a reprint as well, and finally got one.
Yeah.
Oh, also Staff of Domination. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, Staff of Domination got a reprint.
Because they only had Kaladesh Invention and Fifth Dawn.
Yep.
Which had kind of weird printing colors on some of their stuff.
That was when they were still trying to figure out what color artifacts were going to be in the new frame.
Yeah.
I think Fifth Dawn mostly hit the right color palette, but it still wasn't finalized yet. And then the other big one is Vampiric Tutor got a reprint. Probably a good time to pick those up when the set's at peak supply. We should probably get started with Colorless with Jake, why don't you get us started here? You know where we're going to start
right.
with Colorless.
This is Jennifer Lopez, J-Lo jeweled Lotus. I think we'll go with that. Yeah, okay. So it's a Black Lotus for Commander. 0 mana, artifact, sacrifice it, and you get 3 mana of any one color, but you have to spend it to cast your Commander. This has seen, I've heard a fair bit of controversy over the existence of this card and whether or not it's, like the next Sol Ring where you only have 98 cards of choice or whatever in your deck. I am already putting it in like 5 of my decks, and I think I only have like 6 decks, so maybe there's some merit to that.
It looks like it seems strongest. I mean, it's strong. It's probably a little bit too strong. I don't think it's ban-worthy strong. It seems like it is most powerful in commander-centric decks that are kind of on the low end of the color scale, because it's not going to help you get your 3-color or 5-color commander out any quicker, really. The 1 and 2-color commanders are going to get out.
Kenrith says hello.
Hmm?
Kenrith says hello.
Yeah, Kenrith.
And Golos.
I just remember, Alex still owes us a Kenrith Tribal Humans deck at some point. That will be a future episode. But Jeweled Lotus, yeah, probably not my favorite card out of the set. I also probably have to spend money on it, unfortunately, but...
So basically, if your deck is focused on its commander and you want to get your commander out early, this is going to be a card that's really good in your deck. I kind of look at it like I do Mana Vault, which is a card that I don't play in all my decks, but when I want to try to ramp out my commander really quick, it's basically a brown Dark Ritual, and that's what I'm going to treat this as. So if my commander is something that I want to get out turn 1 or 2 and get it out a little bit quicker, I will be putting this in there.
Right. And it's also not one you necessarily... Like, Mana Vault doesn't make the cut even in all the most cutthroat CDH decks. Jeweled Lotus also has the disadvantage of you can't use the mana for anything else. You can't use it to get an early Adnaz or to cheat out a powerful late-game mana rock early. You can literally just use it on your commander. Now, just use it on your commander is an understatement. The format is called Commander.
Especially if your commander is a key part of your deck, which most of the time it is. We kind of strayed away from 5-color good stuff with, like, Sliver Queen as your commander that you never cast. Those are like 5 years ago. So a lot of the time your commander will be a central part of your deck's game plan, and just being able to have more reliable, faster access to it is going to help a lot.
What do you think, Alex?
You guys pretty much summed it up. I mean, it is a 0-mana artifact that makes monocolored decks more powerful, which is, I think, kind of what they wanted to do, considering the fact how many new monocolored partner commanders and commanders came out with this set. And those are the ones that, for the most part, need the help. There are fringe cases that exist out there that are 5-color commanders that only have single colors in their casting costs, the Kenrith and the Jewels of the world. But it also makes it where decks like, the Boogeyman for you to Heliod now.
Not really the Boogeyman, more just the flaky white nightmare.
But so it just makes it so the decks that lose out a little bit with having a smaller color pie to work with get this in a way of acceleration, especially if those decks aren't running green.
Any other closing thoughts before we move on from this?
This is bleeping ridiculous in Najeela. I love it. I can't wait. I want my turn 1 Najeela with Counterspell backup. It will be so good.
Oh, God.
I guess the one more thing we should ask Jake on this one, since it falls into his category. How much is the foil full art version of this going for right now, Jake?
I have no idea, but I know the normal non-foil version is already over $100, which is why I just printed out 8 of them on my LaserJet printer. Woo!
I think Card Kingdom has for sale the full art foil one for almost $700.
Nope.
Yeah, that's kind of dumb.
Moving on. So let's go from the height of expense and excess down to a little uncommon that I think everyone is just kind of ignoring. Probably mostly rightly, but I think it's something that is potentially useful in some budget builds and some really edge case builds. And that is Guildless Commons. We now have an 11th Ravnica Bounceland. So Guildless Commons is colorless. Enters the battlefield tapped. When enters the battlefield, return a land you control to its owner's hand and tap for 2 colorless mana. So it doesn't
Yep.
doesn't fix like the Ravnica Bouncelands. It does provide a tiny bit of mana. It keeps you technically on curve-ish. If you're doing things with landfall and need another way to get lands back into your hand, it exists. We're up to 11. Just don't forget this card exists. That's
I think
all
the
I have to
worst
say
thing about
it.
this card is that it's called Guildless Commons, and it is an uncommon. So there's clearly some disconnect there.
I feel like there should be a petition to change it to Guildless Warrens as compared to Guildless Commons, or Guildless Bazaar, Guildless Shopping Market.
Guildless Uncommons, obviously.
Yeah, I gotcha.
All right, I'll whatever we like. If we're calling the Jeweled Lotus J-Lo, we can call this Guildless Uncommons.
So I'm gonna throw this out there because it's been a while since paper tournaments were a thing, or ever since I've seen it in play. For those that have watched Modern at the time, and you had Amulet Titan in play with things like that, do you think a variation of that could exist with Guildless Commons going more on, colorless route on top of that?
Probably
Or am I the only one
not.
here that actually watched Modern?
No, I know what you're talking about. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Like Guildless Commons is just like an edge case and potentially useful in like a fringe number of decks. I just wanted to make sure we mentioned it as part of our thing.
Maybe I'm just writing some weird fanfic where Amulet Bloom and Tron just kind of come together. And you're just putting in Guildless Commons and bouncing mines and power plants to ramp out dumb stuff in Modern. It's a pipe dream.
Well, speaking of pipe dreams, let's talk about making white good in Commander.
Sorry.
That's okay.
You know my feelings on White or Commander stance.
I know. But they did print a couple of cards in Commander Legends that I am eager to pick up. The first one is the one that we had spoiled some time ago by Gavin, and that is Keeper of the Accord. 3 and a white for a 3/4 human soldier. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more creatures than you, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. And at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more lands than you may search your library for a basic plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So it is more catch-up, ramp, and creature generation in white. It is technically Verdant Force at half the price, potentially, for half the mana cost. Hey, that holds a very special place in my heart. I don't think the first clause is going to be super relevant for very long, but the second clause is definitely what this was meant to be useful for. And Oketra still needs all the help she can get, so I'm getting one.
My only qualm with it is 4 mana is expensive for where that falls.
It is, but in all honesty, my deck and a lot of mono white decks are going to be leaning so hard onto artifacts anyway. You are almost always going to be behind at least one player for getting lands onto the battlefield. It will just be an upgrade of another bad ramp source in Oketra.
Yeah. I mean, that's to say I don't want one. It's an incredibly unique card, and for what it's worth, and we don't talk about it that much on the podcast, even though I feel like we will today because Seb McKinnon, appears on one of the card arts here. The card looks gorgeous.
Yeah, it does. So it looks like it's taking place on a Laura from the art style. It looks super, super cool.
Yeah, with the sigils and whatnot.
Jake, any thoughts about a white card?
What is...
Not positive ones.
Yeah. It's like a land tax that you can block with. Yeah. How about Court of Grace?
It is part of a cycle of courts that cost 2 and 2 colored mana. So in white, blue, black, red, and green. But Court of Grace in particular is one I'm interested in for Oketra. So this is an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. Same across all of the various court enchantments that we're going to see in this set. We're not going to go through all the cycle, I don't think. I think that Court of Grace is just one I wanted to make sure that I mentioned because I really want it for one of my decks. I also think it may be potentially the strongest for the color that it's in. And Court of Grace's ability is, at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Probably underrate for a 4-mana enchantment, but if you're the monarch, you create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying instead, which is pretty strong.
It's kind of like a pseudo less scary Luminarch Ascension, kind of.
So on one hand, I don't know how long I would expect to be able to sit there and pump out angels. On the other hand, the turn you play it, you're going to get to draw a card off of it. and then you'll be able to make some spirit tokens for sure. But the Monarch, number 1 for white, you draw cards. That's good. Number 2 for white, you can probably take the Monarch back with your evasive creatures that you're making. Number 3 for white, and just in general, the Monarch is fun. Having the Monarch in a game, this is one of the best multiplayer mechanics they have ever come up with, and I'm so glad to see it in this set.
Yeah, I really like the concept of this cycle, just because it introduces the Monarch mechanic in all the colors again, and especially in like a casual type of game, Monarch promotes actually attacking and not just having board stalls of people sitting there and staring at each other.
I feel attacked.
I think that getting the...
Well, that's the point of the Monarch.
You will if you're the Monarch. Anyway, the clause on all these where you get the extra bonus if you are the Monarch when it triggers at the beginning of your upkeep, I think that's going to be kind of tricky to reliably get.
Mm-hmm.
But it is nice that they have a secondary consolation buff, I guess. If you're not the Monarch, you still get something.
Yeah, you didn't just pay 4 mana to make one of your opponents the Monarch.
And of note, the red one is 5 mana and the blue one is 3 because consistency would be silly.
Yeah, someone in play design decided things needed to be adjusted. I think those were the only cards that were in white that we wanted to talk about. We're going into our shopping carts, but there are a couple of cards in blue we're going to talk about. Jake, why don't you get us started?
So I'm sure this will come as no surprise to anybody who has ever heard me talk. Hull Breacher. It's one of the splashier cards at the moment. 3 mana, 3/2 flash, Merfolk Pirate. If an opponent would draw a card except for the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, instead you create a treasure token. So that's cool. There's already a lot of like Wheel of Fortune style decks, so this will slot into those very easily. It has flash, so you can get some more punishments off of other people trying to draw cards. It's, good.
Yeah, I need to get a copy of this for Notion Thief, for my Opus Thief deck, excuse me. No doubt about it. It probably just goes in straight over Alms Collector.
Yep, denying people card draw and also giving you mana ramp is good.
And as the resident tribal person here, I want to point out that it has 2 very relevant creature types, both Merfolk and Pirate. So if you've listened to our previous episode where we talked about tribal, Merfolk was amongst one of the tribes that we spoke about. And then Pirates now seeing a resurgence with more focus on what it is they want to do. So its creature types aren't irrelevant either, besides the fact that the card is just busted. It should be Hull Buster instead of Hull Breacher, but...
Well, speaking of pirates, I think that segues us into a card I wanted to talk about with one of the monocolored uncommon commanders with partner, and that is Malcolm, Kean-Eyed Navigator. I just want to first appreciate for a moment that he's just got such a...
The name.
Yeah, just like, yo.
Yes.
Hey, Malcolm, what's up? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm over here in the middle. So Malcolm is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 flying legendary creature, Siren Pirate. Whenever one or more pirates you control deals damage to your opponents, you create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage. So by itself, it is a 2-mana evasive commander who can peck in, and get you a treasure token. If you want to focus on this, if you are able to get access to red and or black, it's probably not inconceivable that you could make this the focus of the deck with, I don't know, effects like Conspiracy and just turn all of your various aristocrat-style effects that are dealing damage into pirates and kind of do a 4-color Rash Me Curious Control type shell where you're generating treasures. I don't think it's particularly powerful, but it seems fun.
One thing that's kind of neat is... I'm just now looking at it. The trigger is when 1 or more pirates you control deal damage to your opponents. It is not combat damage.
That's
so
correct.
You can take advantage of... I know there's a couple pirates that can just do pings, like the Glinthorn Buccaneer.
Yeah, that's the big one. Lightning Rig Runner, I think, is part of a 3-card combo with Malcolm.
And there's one we're going to talk about later in this podcast episode, which would actually be kind of nice on the defensive end of things, too.
Yeah. Malcolm...
There's actually...
Malcolm...
There are 113 pirate cards, which is more than I thought there would be. So I'm sure out of that you can, get some stuff going.
A full half of them came out of the set. Malcolm
And also one is Dockside Extortionist, which I've
Yes,
heard
it
is a good
is.
card.
Yeah, it's good.
Malcolm hasn't done much for me in terms of the card itself, but as the person here that's interested in the WoW or the not WoW lore, the Magic lore, Malcolm is one of the characters that appeared in the Magic literature when they were on Ixalan, along with another one of the commanders, Breaches, that appears in the set as well, and it comes from, in my opinion, some of the best of writing Magic has had in a long time. So. I like that little head nod. Same with the Trapper and Hunter from Innistrad, which we heard about in a single story and then never heard from ever again.
Who I will note, I did open in my sealed pool for our sealed game we're going to do tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, buddy. Now, Alex, there is another deep dive into Magic lore who you are interested in seeing this reprint of. I think we're all a little bit interested, but why don't you tell us about this one?
Probably the most competitive card that's on here from me, which is a turn from the normal, is Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. It is a 3/1 for 4, 3 generic and a blue legendary creature, human rogue. Rogue being one of the more popular creature types, given the previous set with Zendikar Rising. And Sakashima, as you would imagine, just like all his other cards, has the ability to enter the battlefield as a copy of another target creature you control, except it has Sakashima of 1,000 Faces' other abilities. It also has a fun text that says the legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. And, partner.
So the legend rule doesn't apply for anybody not in the know. That simply means you can control multiple permanents with the same English name and you do not lose them. They do
Mirror
not.
Gallery.
Yep. That is super cool on a commander. Just like from a flavor standpoint, it fits Sakashima. From a weird, cool rules Melvin-y standpoint, that's super cool. And then from a power standpoint, take it away, boys.
I mean, I'll lead off with the fact that my competitive EDH decks tend to vary. It is probably the format I least play in my current deck is Winota, because it involves the least amount of colors, and I enjoy what Winota does. That being said, going into the Esper Shard with Sakashima and Tymna is something that kind of appeals to me. Because what's better than one Tymna? 2 Tymnas.
2 Tymnas.
Yeah, there's some potentially dumb things you can do with this. Sakashima is the other commander that people are trying out to partner with that Is It Storm deck we mentioned before with Krark the Thumbless, because then you can make Sakashima a copy of Krark and then play other clones that are copying Krark, and eventually it doesn't quite become a guarantee, but you can make a lot of copies of the spells you're casting and it just gets stupid. It is a cool card.
And the fact that it has partner means you can just, double up on any of your partners, so there's a couple where that's useful.
Just a little bit, right? It's like nothing super crazy, but just a few of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, for that...
2 Vial Smashers.
Yeah. Honestly, I even look at it for just the dumb ones, like that Sultai Hardened Scales deck I tried to make work that I think Alex remembers. It would be kind of cool to have that as the partner with Rayhan, Last of the Abzan.
Yeah.
Just why not have 2 of them, so if something dies, you put twice the counters on something else?
That actually... Yeah, so, I mean, I do remember that deck quite fondly. It's also one that I've currently wanted to try and... I've attempted multiple times to try and rebuild, because Affinity is an awesome type of deck, and I like decks with moving pieces. Anyone that's ever played against my Orzhov Teysa deck know that. But I just can't seem to get the commanders right. So, obviously, the first time you built it with Rayhan and Silas Wren, maybe this does a bit more with less... I know it's going to sound blasphemous. Less scrap Trawler loops from the graveyard for stuff like that. But double Rayhan triggers. So
yeah, that's also pretty good.
And and that does say, we're talking about just copying, commanders and making use of the legend rule, which is all well and good. That's not to say there aren't elements in the 99 that are stupid powerful that having another one would be great. So it's not like so much of the legend rule does or doesn't apply. You have a copy creature in the command zone. So it's like...
And importantly, this is the formatting of Clone where you can only copy your things, you cannot copy your opponent's things, but I think that is a fine balancing choice for this particular card. Speaking of balancing, should we talk about the next card on Jake's list of cards he wants to get?
Is it balanced?
So, if I just talked about Hull Breacher that punishes people for drawing cards. What if it was black but also better? So this is Opposition Agent. Also a 3/2 flash for 3. This is a human rogue. This text, I still love reading it. You control your opponents while they're searching their libraries. And while an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remained exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were any color to cast them. So this is cool. Yeah.
This is borderline busted. So
It's incredibly dumb.
I've been calling this Craven Mind Sensor. It's so ridiculous that this... I mean, yes, mind slavering somebody is kind of black, but it's just a better Aven Mind Sensor, pretty much in every way, except that it can't fly.
It's so dumb.
So important rules notes on this one. The card they find has to be a card they could have searched for with the spell they cast. So if they cast Rampant Growth, you can find a basic land with it. If they cast Demonic Tutor, you can find anything with it. If they cast Worldly Tutor, you can find a creature. If they cast Merchant Scroll, you can find a blue instant. Importantly, if there are multiples of these, the one that came into play most recently is the one that takes effect. You can't make any decisions for them other than what they find. You don't get to choose, you can't make them concede or any of that other garbage people are talking about online. It's powerful, but it's not quite that stupid. It's still stupid.
Now you just have to be careful if you're searching at any point, even if you're trying to do fetch lands or anything, and somebody has 3 mana open or 1 mana because it's black and you can just Dark Ritual into this in response. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's so ridiculous. I also
and I've seen
one.
What's the lore went? Marlin?
Yeah.
Elf Mom.
Yeah,
no,
it's a little,
not Elf
no,
Mom.
The fairy,
Marlin,
or it is an elf,
Marlin
elf
of the
wizard.
Morn Song.
Yeah,
so
I've
Marlin
seen a couple
is...
people building with that. So it's a 3 mana, 2/3 elf wizard. Players can't draw cards. And at the beginning of each player's draw step, they lose 3 life, search their library, and put it in their hand.
And instead, Opposition Agent says that you just search their library and take something.
They lose 3 life, and you take a card from them, and they never get to draw a card again. So that's kind of rude.
But that luck is expensive, though. So it's, 7 mana to assemble that?
6.
6 mana to assemble that, and both are creatures?
Yeah, but one is your commander.
Mm-hmm.
The other has flash. So you just flash in the opposition agent the turn before you go, and then play Marlin. And unless somebody has a response, they're not going to be able to draw into it. So it's kind of mean. It is also the reason Marlin has spiked up to like $35 or something stupid.
Yeah. So Opposition Agent is stupid. I think that is our end of our discussion here.
Actually, I have one question, John.
All right.
How does Glacial Worm work with Opposition Agent?
Oh, God. Why are you doing this, you monster?
It's the only reason Glacial Worm exists is to make judges upset. I can hear him frantically typing. Yeah, don't worry about it. I really don't care.
So, while you're searching your library, you may cast Glacial Worm from your library. I don't know. I will ask on a judge chat later for you. You're a bad person, and you should feel bad.
I am.
So I'm going to make us feel better by talking about a card with really cool art on it. So the next card I wanted to mention that's in my cart is Feast of Succession. This is a budget board wipe with upside. It is 4 and 2 black mana for a total of 6 mana for a sorcery. All creatures get -4/-4 till end of turn. You become the monarch. So printed at uncommon, Languish for 4 mana to give everything -4/-4. Sees play in plenty of decks, and just incidentally adds the monarch into the game. This is kind of nice. I don't have any deck that I'm definitely putting it in. I might put it into my mono black Sir Conrad deck. It does kill Sir Conrad, but it also gives me the monarch and does a lot of board wiping. So yeah, and that art is amazing because Seb.
That's the one I was alluding to earlier. It's like, we don't talk about art much on this podcast. However, this episode, I feel like that is going to be the exception to the rule because Seb McKinnon is present.
Yeah, he did some good stuff. But the next card that we're going to talk about, Alex, you want to talk about this? This art
bonkers.
Reminds me of some things.
Yeah. So the next card on the list, and it's kind of one that I added last minute as I was going through it, Szat's Will. It is a 5 mana, 4 generic and a black instant. Choose one. It's a modal card. If you control a commander, as you cast the spell, you may choose both. The first option is each opponent sacrifices a creature they control with the greatest power. And the second option is exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. Then create X 0/1 Blackfell creature tokens, where X is the greatest power among creature cards exiled this way. So the reason this one kind of appeals to me is this is a bit more on the expensive side. And traditionally effects that cause your opponents to sacrifice creatures aren't that well unless you've got things like Grave
repeatable
Pact,
forms of them. Yeah, like
repeatable
Grave
forms
Pact.
of doing that. But this one, very similar to the... I forget the name of it. It came out in Cons of Tarkir, where it says, hey, you have to sacrifice the biggest one you have. So if someone does land a large Voltron commander that for the most part always have like hexproof and protection, things of that nature, or an Eldrazi, it forces them to sacrifice that. More appealing to me, though, is the second part, where you pretty much for 5 mana get to exile every opponent's graveyards, and then generate a board state based off of the largest power from that. So if you've got, say, an opponent that has a creature with at least a power of 5 in there, what you're doing is you're paying 5 mana to exile all graveyards and then put 5 creature tokens onto the battlefield. Not all decks want that, but there are some decks that would love to just be able to just plop that many tokens down onto the battlefield while also removing graveyards.
Yeah, I wasn't actually looking at this one, but that could also go into Conrad just as another way to exile people's graveyards, get some incidental upside, and potentially kill a big threat. Yeah.
I mean, if you had that card versus the game where it went super long between us,
I would never have been able to cast it because you kept killing my lands.
True, but you could out of nowhere you could get somebody with the exile all cards and then just create blockers.
Well, that is what I did to win the game.
Yeah.
But yes, I agree with you. That you're right. This one I was not looking at, and now I'm looking at it again. And the art on this one is also super cool. It reminds me of The Abyss.
Yeah, I was just like, haven't we seen this art recently? Well, the Abyss, and there's also Peer to the Abyss, which kind of reminds me a little bit of this. I think they might have like the same face, it'd be a distant relation.
I thought you were talking about the movie. I'm like, I don't see that, but sure.
Let's see here. It is not the same artist for Peer into the Abyss, though, I'm afraid to say. Izzy did Peer into the Abyss. All right. I think that's all the cards we wanted to talk about in black. There's a couple of cards I wanted to talk about in red. First one is a non-legendary creature, and that is Emberwild Captain. It is 3 and a red for a 4/2 creature Djinn pirate. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. Running theme of the day, the Monarch is a cool mechanic. I like to see more ways to get it into the game, particularly on cards that are not just so-so commons that don't really do much else. Emberwild Captain is not a so-so common. It says, whenever an opponent attacks you while you're the Monarch, Emberwild Captain deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand. Particularly in my Torbrand deck, that's potentially meaning you swing at me, you take 9 for the pleasure of doing so.
Now, on the subject of your Torbrand deck, it's not a card that I was looking at, but it did make me think of it briefly. Because of how many times I'm just like, he doesn't have a crazy board state, Torbrand's not that dangerous, and then proceed to die 2 turns later from Torbrand. The bestest lizard, Caddis, Emberclaw Familiar, is that something that might be on your radar?
I don't even think I looked at this card. So Caddis, Emberclaw Familiar, is 1 and a red for a legendary creature elemental lizard. It is a 1/1 with partner. Whenever a commander you control deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to each other opponent. Maybe? I don't know what I would cut for it. So I obviously can't take advantage of the partner ability with it. It does allow me then to say if Torbrand dealt 2 damage, it has to be combat damage. It would then be increased to 4 damage by his ability. Then it would deal that much damage of 4 to each opponent, so it would deal 6 to the other 2 players. I mean, it's potentially worth something. I don't know. It's a good question.
Out of all the little ones that just add abilities to the commanders, like the familiars, it's the only one that actually stuck out to me. And the only reason I even looked at it was because it made me think of Torbrand, possibly. But you know more about the deck than I do.
I'm not sure I know much more about the deck than you do, considering my success record with it, but it's at least a really fun deck. Speaking of really fun decks, our first episode was a deck about Ghalta, my Brostorm deck. And the other partner I wanted to talk about out of red is a card that makes me think of Ghalta and potentially more colors. And that is Dargo the Shipwrecker. This is a 7 mana, 6 and a red for a 7/5 legendary creature giant pirate with trample and partner. The rules text reads, as an additional cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice any number of artifacts and or creatures. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each permanent sacrifice this way, and 2 less to cast for each other artifact or creature you've sacrificed this turn. So, multiple unique things. First and foremost, red sacrificing creatures as part of casting a spell is like weird, edge case, potentially useful somewhere. But red sacrificing artifacts as part of weird loops, well, I like that. But just in terms of easy to do, red has been good at generating treasure tokens. If you sacrifice a treasure token to this, you will get 1 colored mana from the treasure. It will then reduce his cost by 2. So 1 treasure token takes his cost from 6 and a red down to 4.
Jeweled Lotus can get 5 mana off of this guy.
Yes, and importantly, it's for the entire turn. So if you sacrifice 2 treasures, what's 3 treasures the first time to cast him? Yeah, it'll take 3 treasures the first time you cast him. Then he costs your red mana to cast, and you then have the mana to cast him again and again. It just seems really easy to go off with this guy, in a similar way to what I try to do with my Galta deck. I don't know where I would partner him, whether it would be in Grixis with Silas Wren, or in green with, I don't know, Ikra Shadiki, but...
Hear me out.
Okay.
Sakashima. Just have 2 of them.
Well, the issue is you can't actually reduce Sakashima's cost.
Yeah, I would have to go a lot more into this than just off the top of my head. But it would be easy to loop and get an unbounded number of commander casts. And then you could use, what's her name? Jessica, the other new red partner in here. You could go like mono red and use her as a payoff. So
Jessica Thrice Reborn is a planeswalker who can be your commander with partner. She is 2 and a red for a 0 loyalty planeswalker. She enters the battlefield with a number of loyalty counters on her for each time you've cast a commander from the command zone this game. Her 0 ability is choose target creature until your next turn. If that creature would deal combat damage to one of your opponents, it deals triple that damage to that player instead. And -X, she deals X damage to each of up to 3 targets.
That sounds good.
It does, which would mean that in a deck like Galta, where the main thing, its main issue is just trying to make sure it draws enough cards to win, with Galta, with Jessica and Dargo, it really doesn't. Once you have the setup to make treasure tokens, you can pretty much just go off and then have enough cast to cast Jessica with unbounded loyalty counters and 3 people. I don't want to unseat my Torbrand deck as my favorite mono red deck, though.
I mean, it's your only mono red deck.
Fair point. Fair point.
I don't even know how many mono black decks I have anymore.
I mean, aren't all of them mono black with just splashing other colors? I mean, your favorite commander is Ad Nauseam.
That's also true. My sealed deck is basically mono black as well, just splashing 2 colors.
To the surprise of no one.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
the
if this is
black card I opened that I'm not playing is Vampiric Tutor.
Well, maybe if this is someone's first episode, they may not realize how much you loved Black Jake, but now everybody knows. All right, were there any other cards in red, or should we talk about a card that Alex is at least eyeballing in green for his new Omnath deck?
As an honorable mention in red, simply because of novelty and because I'm using it in my competitive deck, Roguerack, Son of Roga. It is a Kobold Warrior with 0/1 for, drumroll please, 0. With first strike, menace, and trample. Also a partner.
Yeah, and it's actually making waves as a potential fairly strong Grixis farm deck in CEDH. So in farm decks, you're just trying to go as fast as you can and hit Ad Nauseam or Peer into the Abyss.
Turbo Ad Nauseam, yeah. Having a 0 cost commander ups your storm count. It gives you something to play Diabolic Intent or Culling the Weak off of.
Yeah, it basically takes away the downside to all of your extra spells that have the quote-unquote side effect of making you sacrifice a creature.
Let's, what's the drum that you can tap a creature for mana?
Springleaf Drum?
Springleaf Drum.
Springleaf Drum, yeah. Lets you actually run that as like a mana rock.
Yeah, it makes Mox Amber very viable.
Oh yeah, turns that on.
So yeah, there's a lot of potential upside to this weird little weirdo.
Yeah, and I think the only other card in red that I want to mention, not because it's good, but because it's hilarious, Togo, Goblin Weaponsmith. Uh,
Rock.
I'm not going to go too detailed into the card, but essentially it has a landfall trigger that when a land enters the battlefield, you create an equipment called Rock. And it's just a
The
goblin
best thing
holding
about
rock.
this are the tokens.
The token is actually amazing. Stop what you're doing right now, everybody. Pause the podcast and just go load up the token list on Scryfall for this. It is literally a rock perched majestically on top of another rock with his trademark on it. It's oh god, they nailed it with Togo.
I mean, an equipped creature with this rock equipment has 1 tap, sacrifice rock. This creature deals 2 damage to any target. So it's definitely thematic, and it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's unique, and it is probably one of the best landfall triggers I've ever seen.
Well, when you say best,
Listen, I want to end a turn with like 10 rocks in play. What do? Not much, but I have them.
well, how are you going to get 10 rocks into play on the same turn?
Ha ha! See what you did there. So, leading into green and dumb things in Magic, Reshape the Earth is a 9 mana. That's right, 9. 6 generic and 3 forest sorcery. It simply reads: search a library for up to 10 land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library.
Not basic
That's
lands.
ridiculous.
Just lands. So this is on my radar as I have an Omnath deck that I just enjoy landfall in. Do I think this is going to make the deck stronger? No. Do I think having 10 landfall triggers with all the goofiest lands in the deck doing things make it fun? Absolutely. So I can get like, here's a Field of the Dead, and here's a Vesuva, and now they see one another, and here's a whole bunch of zombies, and it's just going to be a good time.
This is what I kind of picture Mythics should be. Just big, splashy, dumb, and wonderful. I have no use for this card in any deck that I own, but this is what I want to see Mythics being.
And the entire cycle of 9 mana Mythics, like, all feel mythical in their abilities. So this isn't just like, oh, search for 2 basic land cards. Like, no, this is just go get 10 of any lands, plop them onto the battlefield. Just, here you go.
Maze's End.
Yeah.
Boom!
Yeah, actually, yes. Maze's End plus...
Mace's End, 9 gates, activate Mace's End, mic drop.
and Guildless Commons. Here we go.
Not a gate, unfortunately.
Thematics. But it's like I'm gonna go reshape the earth. Here's a Field of the Dead. Here's a Vesuva copying Field of the Dead. Here's a Gaia's Cradle. So I've just here we go. So all it needs is a way for the lands to come into play untapped. Unfortunately, cards like Amulet of Vigor exist to help fix that issue. But it's just dumb things can happen with it, and if you can get the lands to come into play untapped, then it's all coming up Millhouse.
Absolutely. So speaking of all coming up Millhouse, we talked a little bit about my Sultai Hardened Scales deck that I've never really made work, but always kind of want to make work. Slurk All Ingesting is another potential partner for that +1/+1 counters deck. First of all, the name...
I've never heard that name said
Slurk
out loud.
All
I'm just like,
Ingesting is... Mwah, chef's kiss.
Slurk.
Slurk. I mean, he literally drinks your milkshake. So it is 5 and a green for a legendary creature ooze with partner. It is a 0/0. Enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever Slurk or another creature you control dies, if it had a +1/+1 counter on it, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control that has a +1/+1 counter on it. So where Rayhan went tall with making one creature giant after things died, Slurk would instead take those +1/+1 counters and grow your entire board. I don't actually know which one would be better. Both are potentially interesting. Rayhan just costing less is probably better.
I'm always in favor of going wide as compared to going tall, personally.
The 3 mana cost versus the 6 mana cost is a huge difference.
Yeah, but then you can say, I cast Slurk.
Yeah.
All ingesting.
Yeah, so it's in my cart, because this is a deck I will eventually someday rebuild in some way, shape, or form, and I just want to have one.
It's Flubber.
Jake, is there anything in green you wanted to talk about before we move on to multicolor?
Nope, not me.
So I got a bunch of silly cards in multicolor that we want to talk about. The first one we should probably talk about should come as no surprise for anybody. They printed Scrap Trawler as a commander again, and they added another color and didn't restrict me to just clerics this time.
I think this is. I know we just moved into multicolor, but I think we'd be remiss if we talked about one throne earlier, or one court earlier.
Are there another one you want to talk about?
I don't know how we missed it, but I think Court of Bounty is worth talking about.
All right, do you want to read it?
Yeah, Court of Bounty is a 4-mana enchantment. It is 2 generic and 2 green. When it enters the battlefield once again, you become the monarch. Upside there draws you a card. Something that green does, want as well as white does. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you're the monarch, instead you may put a creature or a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So I think that if you're a monarch trigger is actually pretty strong.
That is pretty strong. Even the quote-unquote downside of just dropping the land is stronger than I realized. It definitely wants to be partnered with another color that's going to load up your hand, just so you're taking advantage of this as much as possible. Oh, good find, man. I like it.
I'm thinking either, blue-green or white-green. Any way to... so if you do blue-green, and you talked about it before, or, white-green earlier, sorry, we have the evasive creatures that can kind of just ping in for damage to ensure that you're the monarch. That'd be a way to just kind of ensure that you're getting multiple land drops per turn and, dropping creatures onto the battlefield. So, imagine this perfect case scenario where you start off with your little 1/1 creature, and you ping in, become the monarch, and then next turn that you are the monarch, and you get to put a card from your hand, wait for it, an Elesh Norn. That you can then copy, but then all of your 1/1 spirit creatures would be 3/3 spirits, or 7/7 angels. That's IQ 300 there. But no, seriously, it's a powerful effect, and I think that can cheat creatures into play is a big one.
Yeah, I agree. I did not look at this one closely enough. I'm gonna add it to my cart.
And I think, Jake, I'm gonna force you to talk about this one. Apex Devastator. That is the card that is most not you. But
oh, I had to look this one up. I even opened it in my sealed pool. It's a 10 mana, 10/10 Chimera Hydra with Cascade, 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 Cascade. Which is pretty great text.
So the way this works is cascades, you just do them in order. So you resolve the first cascade, resolve the second cascade, resolve the third cascade, resolve the fourth cascade.
And then you get a 10/10.
Yes, without trample or any form of evasion. But one of those heads, it does look like a dodo.
So you've got a dodo. You clearly have the capricious corn, the goat hydra.
A goat, a lion, a dodo, a
turtle,
dragon.
That looks like a buck-toothed dragon in this art.
He does look like a buck-toothed dragon.
And I think the farthest one looks like a turtle.
No, it looks like a buck-toothed dragon. I'm sorry, he's one of the little rascals now. His name is Bucky.
I know, if there's ever a card that falls farthest from what Jake does in Magic, it's Apex Devastator.
Well, I'm getting a little impatient. I want to talk about a card that falls exactly with where I fall in Commander, and that is Kolfinor, the last U. So we've seen the saproling of Kolfinor in the past, but now we finally see Kolfinor himself. And hailing back to the Shadowmoor Eventide block and Morningtide, we have Treefolk in Abzan? Abzan. So 3 a black, a white, and a green for a 3/7 legendary creature Treefolk Shaman with Vigilance and Reach. Whenever Kolfinor, the last U, or another creature you control dies, return up to one other target creature card with lesser toughness from your graveyard to your hand. So it is Scrap Trawler, basically. It is not restricted to artifacts. It makes you build around toughness in weird ways, where you want to have things that have high toughness that die easily to get back things with lesser toughness. The balancing act there will be weird. I don't know how I'm going to do anything with this, but I'm going to do something with this. Mark my words.
I don't think anybody here doubts you. Not even a little bit. As much as we'd like to.
Looking forward to seeing it.
And speaking of Scrap Trawler, I'm going to skip ahead a few cards here. There's an uncommon Selesnya commander I wanted to mention. Hamza, Guardian of the Arashin, which I think is also from Alara. It is 4 a green and a white for a legendary creature, Elephant Warrior, a 5/5. It costs 1 less to cast for each other creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. And creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it.
I think that might actually be Tarkir.
It
I
could
think
be
that might be
Tarkir.
Abzan.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, anyway, we'll have our Vorthos argument off air, but maybe I'm just all lard out. Anyway, Hamza is a cost reducer in the command zone. Just like my Rakdos deck is, Hamza only requires you to have creatures that have +1/+1 counters on them, which is pretty easy to do in green and white. Pretty easy to do in artifact style decks with things like modular and affinity anyway. So I don't know if anything is actually there, but this is another potential scrap trawler commander.
If it had partner, you would have your answer as to what should go with Rayhan.
Yes, no doubt about it. But I'm kind of happy they did not print any multicolored commanders with partner this time. It really limits what they were able to do, and it allowed each one of those partners to be in their own special niche. Alex, I need to catch my breath from all these cool scrap trawler effects. Why don't you tell us about one of the multicolor cards you're interested in?
Yeah, so it's funny, for all of the commanders that have come out from the set, it's probably the set with the least amount of things that I've personally been looking forward to. That being said, Felice Reverent Medium is a 3/4 for 5, 3 generic, a black and a white, legendary creature human cleric, because cleric is a type that matters still. At the beginning of each end step, create X 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying, where X is the number of tokens you created this turn. The biggest draw for me on this one is actually my old Teysa deck, where I was constantly just generating spirit tokens, zombie tokens, or warrior tokens through Teysa's ability, through Krab and Regna's ability, and things of that nature. And it struck me as, it would fit in there. And as keeping on with the theme of Commander Legends, the artwork on it is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, she kind of looks like she looks like she should be on the cover of an 80s album.
Yeah. Maybe like a Blondie album, maybe?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, but so she's essentially a anointed procession in your command zone.
Yeah.
At the end of your turn, you'll just, however much trouble you got up to, just make it double.
Yep. And Teysa's one of the decks that I have where it's so low to the ground and so compact in what it does. Very few and far between do cards come along where I'm just like, you know what? This really would fit. And for a bit of perspective on that, the last time a card actually came into where I'm like, okay, I need to make a change to this deck, was actually Smothering Tithe.
Wow. So it's a bit of an impact, you're saying, then.
Yeah.
Would it unseat Teysa as the commander?
No. Teysa as the commander is the thing that makes the deck work. Is having that kind of power and removal in the command zone. This would, I don't want to make it sound like it's more of a kind of a win more, even though it could kind of fall into that category. There are games of attrition where I've gone into where I'm able to just barely hold the table back with Teysa and her abilities. Having a card like this where it can help break parity, as well as, being big enough to block Tymna, is it would be nice. I'm not saying that it would stay around in the deck, but out of all the cards that have recently come out, it is one of the ones I'm just like, okay, I want to see where this one goes.
All right. Well, Jake, before I get back to gushing over weird commanders, is there any multicolor cards you want to talk about?
Not in particular. The Grixis Ogre Wizard Obika looks kind of interesting. I might mess around with that, but we briefly talked about her earlier. That's pretty much it.
All right, so other cards that I'm interested in here. Gen, Arcanum Weaver. He is Mardu. He is red, white, and black for a legendary creature human wizard. He is a 2/3, and you can pay Mardu colors, red, white, and black, tap, sacrifice an enchantment, return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's Enchantress and Mardu. And Enchantress is always kind of cool and right on the edge of something I want to make happen. And in Mardu, you get to play with fun effects like Raise Dead and Animate Dead and Dance of the Dead. And I like those effects. So it's potentially a cool commander to mess around with. I don't know what it would actually look like, but I like to see effects like these just branching out in other colors. And Mardu Enchantress isn't really something we've seen before.
It would be an interesting one. I don't know how I feel about Enchantress lacking, the Enchantress not having green in there. But
You still get a little bit of it out of white. If you stick heavily...
White has a couple.
Yeah, if you stick heavily to auras, you can kind of replace the green enchantresses.
It's like a Mesa Enchantress and the core
Spirit Dancer,
something.
you have SRAM, Senior Edificer. You probably don't have the density you really want, but I don't know. It looks interesting. And the last one I put on our list to talk about that kind of caught me by surprise, I had to reread it a few times, was a Verna, the Chaos Bloom. So a Verna costs Teamer, so green, blue, red for a legendary creature, Elemental Shaman. She is a 4/2. As you cascade, you may put a land card from among the exiled cards onto the battlefield tapped. So it's a potential Teamer landfall commander that is not the typical landfall shenanigans. You don't necessarily need to have a bunch of extra landfall enablers. You can just have a lot of payoffs and ways to cascade. Now, I haven't looked deeply enough to know what kind of reasonable ways there are to cascade. I think the best one is probably that Ethereum Horned Sorcerer from Plane Chase.
Sounds right.
Which you can reuse and just keep cascading over and over to potentially just hit more land drops. Again, it's just kind of weird and unique, and I don't know. I like Teamer for landfall, and that's a potentially weird way to do it.
I can see that. I actually toyed around with the concept of maybe having it in Omnath, but there wasn't just enough to sit there and say. It was the only thing that would... It itself would cascade and then nothing more. So I had nothing really more to do with it.
Yeah, it would be one...
I like the...
Go ahead, Jake.
I was just going to say, I like the phrasing on the card is, as you cascade, you do your trigger.
Yeah, so, I don't know. It could be super, super stupid. It could be super, super cool. Who knows? We'll find out someday. But I think that kind of covers all the cards we wanted to put into our cart for this particular set. Are there any other cards we wanted to mention?
No, I think I'm good.
No, I think that was it.
Then I guess it's time for our favorite segment, the hot seat.
Oh, yes, that is a thing.
That is a thing, and I got a question for us this week.
No.
So, Alex, our fans may not know, but you're moving soon.
I am.
It's an exciting time.
It's an anxiety-inducing time. I move in 10 days.
Well, now, what could you possibly be anxious about? All you're doing is taking all of your worldly possessions, carefully putting them inside of fragile cardboard boxes, and then hauling them many miles to your new home. And then you are exhausting yourself as you carry them on and off of a truck into your new home, to the point where by the end of it, you just want to sit there and flop on an empty floor because unboxing something at this point feels like death itself.
I'm not really sure where you're going with this, but
I mean,
it's kind of amusing.
Yeah, I mean, neither am I. I mean, you are...
So, our hot seat question this week. Imagine you have a move coming up, and if you could choose any character from Magic's lore to help you, who would you choose?
There has to be a character from lore that can simply just magic something from point A and move it to point B. I kind of want to say Teferi, but he has issues bringing those things back.
Urza did it, but...
At least in a timely manner, Teferi may not be able to be much help.
It's like, dude, it's been 3 months now. Where is my couch?
Just wait 1,000 years.
I'll be fine. I don't know, rightly. It's a good question. I mean, I could forego the whole magic in general and just find someone that can just pick up said truck and move it, but just being able to just, like, poof my entire belongings just into the new house. I'd probably have to say Teferi.
So, taking the risk of cards being lost in the time stream for a few centuries?
Yeah, you know what? He's gotten better.
Hopefully.
I mean, I would say Urza, but I would get, like, for every one thing that he did useful, there'd be, like, 29 other things that were just absolutely horrendous.
I mean, he would get all of your stuff to your house. He may commit some minor genocide along the way doing it, and he may betray his closest allies in horrible ways.
Like, I don't want to find out that my couch somehow automated itself and killed my neighbor.
What about you, Jake? Who would you call for help with your next move?
Karn?
He's going to animate your refrigerator.
Well, he's also just, like, super chill and strong.
Isn't there a card literally called Beast of Burden that has Karn on it?
Yep.
Yeah. He could just carry boxes.
He probably just has some good stories to tell you, too, the whole time. And you wouldn't have to buy him any beer or pizza to thank him.
It's true.
Be
Just have to deal with potentially having some oil drip out.
It's probably nothing.
And corrupt your fridge.
So, Alex, I think the person you may have been thinking of from the lore who could just teleport things from wherever to wherever, Venser.
Yeah, Venser would probably... Venser would be a good one.
Because his whole thing is literally teleportation. That's his gimmick.
So long as martyrdom wasn't included at the end of it.
Yeah, but then again, I guess you get out of buying pizza and beer if he sacrifices himself to save everyone else from the Phyrexians. Or, in this case, Karn. Oh my god, we came full circle with it.
We did. We've done it.
Yikes.
Nerds.
Well, I hope your move goes better than may potentially involve glistening oil or martyrdom. So why don't we call that an episode? Anything else anyone else wants to get out there before we call this one to a close?
Honorable mention for moving Ramos Dragon Engine.
Surprised Jake didn't say that one, honestly. I honestly thought that would be his go-to answer when I had this discussion. Well,
Bosch. Bosch Iron Golem. He will just throw everything. Okay, that's what I'm going with.
If you don't mind sacrificing that excellent vacuum cleaner you have.
Yep.
Or your magic cards.
Well, all right, guys. We're going to get out of here. Until next time, I'm John.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Jake.
You can reach the crew from Gemstone Mine on Twitter at GemstoneMineMTG or send us an email at gemstoneminepodcast@gmail.com. On YouTube, we're Gemstone Mine Podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.